was creepy. Hey guys, I couldn't wait another week to do this podcast. I'm really excited to do this one. It's one of my favorite topics in American history. It is Lizzie Borden and the Borden family murders. So, who was Lizzie Borden? Well, Lizzie Borden was an American woman tried and acquitted of the August 4th, 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts. No one else was ever charged in the murders, and despite outrage from other residents, Borden spent the remainder of her life in Fall River. She died of pneumonia at age 66, just days before the death of her sister Emma. The murders and trial received widespread publicity throughout the United States, and along with Borden herself, they remain a topic in American culture to the present day. They have been depicted in numerous films, theatrical productions, library works, and folk rhymes. They are still very well known in the Fall River area. Lizzie Andrew Borden was born July 19th, 1860 in Fall River, Massachusetts to Sarah Anthony Borden and Andrew Jackson Borden. Her father, who was of his English and Welsh descent, grew up in a very modest surrounding and struggled financially as a young man. Despite being the descendant of wealthy and influential local residents, he eventually prospered in the manufacture and sale of furniture and caskets, then became a successful property developer. He was a director of several textile mills and owned considerable commercial property. He was also president of the Union Savings Bank and director of the Durfee Sale Deposit and Trust Company. Despite his wealth, Andrew was known as a frugality. For instance, the Borden home lacked indoor plumbing, although that was a common accommodation for wealthy people at the time. Borden and her older sister Emma had a relatively religious upbringing and attended Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, she was very involved in church activities, including teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants to the United States. 3 years after the death of Lizzie Borden's mother Sarah, Andrew married Abby Durfee Gray. Lizzie stated that she called her stepmother Mrs. Borden and demurred on whether they had a cordial relationship. She believed that Abby had married her father for his wealth. Bridget Sullivan, whom they called Maggie, was the Bordens' 25-year-old live-in maid who had immigrated to the United States from Ireland. She testified that Lizzie and Emma rarely ate meals with the family. In May 1892, Andrew killed multiple pigeons in his barn with a hatchet, believing they were attracting local children to hunt them. Lizzie had recently built a roost for the pigeons and had been commonly recounted that she was upset over the killings. Although the veracity of this has been disputed, a family argument in July 1892 prompted both sisters to take extended vacations in New Bedford, Massachusetts. After returning to Fall River a week before the murders, Lizzie chose to stay in a local rooming house for 4 days before returning to the family residence. Tensions had been growing within the family in the months before the murders, especially over Andrew's gifts of real estate to various branches of Abby's family. After their stepmother's sister received a house, the sisters had demanded and received a rental property, the home they had lived in until their mother died, which they purchased from their father for $1. A few weeks before the murders, they sold the property back to their father for $5,000, which was equivalent to $144,000 in 2020. The night before the murders, John Morse, the brother of Lizzie and Emma's deceased mother, visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with Andrew. Some writers have speculated that their conversation, particularly about property transfer, may have aggravated an already tense situation. For several days before the murders, the entire household had been violently ill. A family friend later speculated that mutton, left on the stove to use in meals over several days, was the cause, but Abby had feared poisoning, as Andrew had not been a popular man. August 4th, 1892. John Morse arrived in the evening of August 3rd and slept in the guest room that night. After breakfast the next morning, at which Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, Morse, and the Bordens' maid Bridget were present. Andrew and Morse went into the sitting room where they chatted for nearly an hour. Morse left around 8:48 a.m. to buy a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River, planning to return to the Borden home for lunch at noon. Andrew left for his morning walk sometime after 9 a.m. Although the cleaning of the guest room was one of Lizzie and Emma's regular chores, Abby went upstairs sometime between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed. According to forensic investigation, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. She was first struck on the side of the head with a hatchet which cut her just above the ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor. creating contusions on her nose and forehead. Her killer then struck her multiple times, delivering 17 more direct hits to the back of her head. When Andrew returned home around 10:30 a.m., his key failed to open the door, so he knocked for attention. Sullivan went to unlock the door, finding it jammed. She uttered a curse. She would later testify that she heard Lizzie laughing immediately after this. She did not see Lizzie, but stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. This was considered significant, as Abby was already dead at the time, and her body would have been visible to anyone on the home's second floor. Lizzie later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked her where Abby was, and she had replied that a messenger had delivered Abby a summons to visit a sick friend. Lizzie stated that she had then removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he lay down on the sofa for a nap, an anomaly contradicted by the crime scene photos which show Andrew wearing his boots. She then informed Sullivan of a department store sale and permitted her to go, but Sullivan felt unwell and went to take a nap in her bedroom instead. Sullivan testified that she was in her third-floor room resting from cleaning windows when just before 11:10 a.m. she heard Lizzie call from downstairs, "Maggie, come quick, father's dead." Somebody came in and killed him. Andrew was slumped on the couch in the downstairs sitting room, struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyes had been split cleanly in two, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked. His still bleeding wounds suggested a very recent attack. Dr. Bowen, the family's physician, arrived from his home across the street to determine that both victims had indeed died. Detective estimated his death had occurred at approximately 11 a.m. Lizzie Borden's initial answers to the police officers' questions at times strange and contradictory. Initially, she reported hearing a groan or a scraping noise before entering the house. 2 hours later, she told police that she had heard nothing and entered the house not realizing that anything was wrong. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if someone could go upstairs and look for her. Sullivan and a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, were halfway up the stairs, their eyes level with the floor, when they looked into the guest room and saw Abby lying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Borden reported that they disliked her attitude. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite her attitude and changing alibis, nobody bothered to check her for bloodstains. Police did search her room, but it was a curiosity inspection. At the trial, they admitted to not doing proper search because Borden was not feeling well. They were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. In the basement, police found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. That was suspected of being the murder weapon. Because of the mysterious illness that struck the family household before the murders, the family's milk and Andrew and Abby's stomachs were tested for poison, which none was found. Residents suspected Lizzie of purchasing hydrocyanic acid in a diluted form from the local drugstore. She defended that she inquired about the acid so she could clean her furs. Borden appeared at the inquest hearing on August 8th. Her behavior was erratic and she often refused to answer questions even if the answers would be beneficial to her. She often contradicted herself and provided alternating accounts of the morning in question, such as saying she was in the kitchen reading a magazine when her father arrived home, then saying she was in the dining room doing some ironing, and then saying she was coming down the stairs. She also said she removed her father's boots and put slippers on him, while police photographs clearly showed Mr. Borden wearing his boots. On August 11th, Borden was served with a warrant of arrest and jailed. Borden's trial took place in New Bedford starting on June 5th, 1893. Prosecuting attorneys were Jose Knowlton, a future United States Supreme Court Justice William Moody. Defending were Andrew Jennings, Melvin Adams, and former Massachusetts Governor George D. Robinson. 5 days before the trial's commencement, on June 1st, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. This time the victim was Bertha Manchester, who was found hacked to death in her kitchen. The similarities between the Manchester and Borden's murders were striking and noted by jurors. However, José Correa de Mello, a Portuguese immigrant, was later convicted of Manchester's murders in 1894 and was determined not to have been in the vicinity of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. Though no bloody clothing was found at the scene, Russell testified that on August 8, 1892, she had witnessed Borden burn a dress in the kitchen stove, saying it had been ruined when she brushed against wet paint. During the course of the trial, defense never attempted to challenge this statement. After an hour and a half of deliberation, a jury acquitted Borden of the murders. Although acquitted at trial, Borden remains the prime suspect in her father and stepmother's murders. Prominent suggestion that she was physically and sexually abused by her father, which drove her to kill him. There is little evidence to support this, but incest was not a topic that would have been discussed at the time, and the methods for collecting physical evidence would have been quite different in 1892. Speculation also is that Abby had caught Lizzie and Bridget Sullivan together and had reacted with horror and disgust, and that Lizzie had killed Abby with a candlestick. When Andrew returned home, she had confessed to him, but killed him in a rage with a hatchet when he reacted exactly as Abby had. After the trial, the Borden sisters moved into a large modern house in the Hill neighborhood in Fall River. Around this time, Lizzie began using the name Lisbeth A. Borden. At their new house, which Lisbeth dubbed Maplecroft, they had a staff that included live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman. Despite the acquittal, Borden was ostracized by Fall River society. Her name was again brought up in the public eye when she was accused of shoplifting in 1897 in Providence, Rhode Island. In 1905, shortly after an argument over a party that Lisbeth had given for actress Nance O'Neill, Emma moved out of the house and never saw her sister again. Borden was ill in her last year following the removal of her gallbladder. She died of pneumonia on June 1st, 1927 in Fall River. 9 days later, Emma died from chronic nephritis at the age of 76 in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire. You've all heard the rhymes. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Another less-known rhyme, Andrew Borden is now dead. Lizzie hit him on the head. Up in heaven he will sing. On the gallows she will swing. There are many theories and legends of what actually happened on August 4th, 1892 in Fall River. Did Lizzie commit these murders out of hatred of her father and stepmother? Did John Morse commit the murders over real estate and money? Or did a demonic presence make Lizzie or John Morse kill Abby and Andrew Borden? Legends have it that 40 years before the murders, Lizzie's great aunt, Eliza, killed her 2 children in a well, her house directly behind the Borden house. Another legend is that John Morse practiced cult activity on his home built on the Freetown State Forest. Was Lizzie mentally there when these murders happened, or did something take over her body? Did a demonic presence that is said to curse the Borden family for all these years commit these murders? The Bordens are now buried in Oak Grove Cemetery in Fall River, Massachusetts. I have visited both the cemetery and stayed overnight several times in the Lizzie Borden house. I have caught screams in the cemetery coming from the Borden plot. In the house, I have heard footsteps. I have heard screams. I have heard women's voices. I'd like to hear your thoughts on the Borden murders. Again, this is one of my favorite topics in American history. I've read several books, watched several documentaries. Who do you think committed the murders? Was it Lizzie? Was it her Uncle John Morse? Or was it a demonic presence that took over the body of Lizzie? Can't wait to hear what you think, guys. Thanks for listening. Take care.